Fans may have been misled into buying tickets they thought were better than they actually were. So it says seats labeled as platinum were sold at a premium without consumers being made fully aware that they didn't even come with any extra benefits. And it says there was insufficient information provided on different ticket categories and prices. Now, the CMA says Ticketmaster has made some changes since the investigation began in September, but says more work is still needed. And Ticketmaster says it welcomes the input and says it aimed to provide a simple, transparent, and consumer-friendly experience.
Okay, and how are the markets looking, Crystal Lee?
In Europe, markets are falling. Germany is down. The UK is up. France is down. In Asia, markets are mostly higher. So Japan is up. Shanghai is down. Hong Kong is up. Oil is up 64 cents to 69.64 U.S. per barrel. Gold is up $8 to $3,027.70 U.S. per ounce. And the dollar is up 0.15 of a cent to 70.2 cents U.S.
Okay, thanks, Crystal Lee. Talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, thanks, Andrew.
That's Crystal Lee Ramlacan with business news, and Angela McInnes is back from our newsroom. Angela, good morning.
Good morning, Andrew. Canada's party leader Jagmeet Singh is in London today. He's coming here after a stop in Hamilton. Liberal leader Mark Carney is also here today. He'll start his day in Windsor, then come to London for an afternoon event before heading to Kitchener-Waterloo in the evening. Andrew.
Thank you very much, Angela. The national news is coming up in a couple of minutes. Right after that, we're going to hear what increased defense spending could mean here in London. And London Hydro says more of its copper wire is being stolen. We'll hear why that's a big deal at 8:20. It's going to be snowy pretty much all morning. 2 to 4 centimeters of snow. It should end around noon. A northwest wind gusting to 40 kilometers an hour today, a high of 1 degree. Clear, a low of -7 tonight, and right now it's -3 with light snow. And you're listening to London Morning on CBC Radio 1. We're also live on the CBC News app. My name is Andrew Brown. World Report is next.
Today on Q with Tom Powell. Alex Lifeson spent decades of his life as the guitarist in the iconic Canadian band Rush. Now, 10 years after Rush's last show, Alex has a new band. They're called Envy of None. So he'll be here to reflect on his time in Rush and tell you how he knew he was ready to be in a new band.
This is a band. We've created a band, and I'm in it. This is a good thing.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
We're in Surrey, British Columbia, kicking off The Current's cross-country travels, speaking with Canadians about who they're voting for and why. From tariffs to Trump to immigration, the issues that will drive the vote here on the coast. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Peter Cowan in St. John's. For the federal leaders seeking to be Prime Minister, there are a lot of seats up for grabs in Southern Ontario. The region is in the middle of a campaign blitz. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is headed to Quebec after a big night in Hamilton, and Hamilton is where NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is. Liberal leader Mark Carney, well, he's headed to Windsor. The CBC's Janice McGregor is here to break down the messaging. Janice, the Conservatives and the NDP leaders appear to be focusing on a battle for seniors' votes this morning.
Yeah, look, someone in the Conservative War Room this morning referred to seniors' votes as the crown jewel in a campaign. Why? Because seniors turn out to vote. And the populist appeals we're going to hear today from the various leaders for those votes manifest themselves differently depending on where they come from. Pierre Poilievre's new policy this morning is focused on letting seniors that are still earning keep more of what they make, up to $34,000 a year if a Conservative government is elected. When the various credits are factored in, that's an increase of about 10 grand. Conservatives would also allow seniors to keep their savings sheltered in an RRSP until age 73. That's up from age 71. Again, something that helps seniors who are still working and saving. The choice to roll this out in Quebec this morning speaks to strategy too on the Conservatives' part. When you get beyond Montreal, the Bloc Québécois and the Conservatives are sometimes competing for the same nationalist vote to be the best alternative to Federalist Liberals. BQ leader Yves-François Blanchet focuses on protecting seniors a lot because they're often his base. It's also a message that plays well in blue-collar ridings, though, with working-class folks who want to retire comfortably soon, one day, maybe. Here's Poilievre speaking to a packed house of 4,500 people on a factory floor in Hamilton last night.
It is a tax cut for retired seniors who are on a fixed income. It is. Are we any of those here today?
Jagmeet Singh is also visiting a seniors facility in that same battleground, Hamilton, today, but his pitch to seniors is going to be more focused on a social safety net approach. New Democrats portray Liberal actions so far as inadequate to protect seniors, and they portray Conservatives as likely to bring cuts. And Poilievre yesterday had to go on the defensive, trying to reassure people that no one who's now benefiting from recent programs like dental care and pharmacare are going to lose by voting Conservative.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa, thank you.
You're welcome.
For voters in northern Alberta, oil and gas policy is a key issue in this election campaign. Fort McMurray is a community at the centre of Canada's energy sector. The CBC's Julia Wong is there, checking in with voters.
There's a buzz in the air as hundreds of people pack the annual Fort McMurray job fair, like Laura Lee Hartle. She's looking for work in oil and gas.
And I was hoping to find some administration jobs here.
Hartle is also thinking about the upcoming election, and these issues are top of mind.
Job opportunities, housing is also a big one.
For job seeker Norman Savoy, issues such as immigration and taxes are high on his list, along with this.
I'd like to see more pipeline come around. Pipeline work.
Sentiments that are no surprise. Fort McMurray is an oil and gas town. Livelihoods depend on it. Trevor Bowe is the president of Inner City Diesel, an environmental dewatering and tailings management company. What the leaders say will affect his business.
The emissions reduction policies that we look to hear from all the major parties. The second probably being carbon pricing, their strategy for that. And then
as the trade war drags on, Bowe says he's looking for a specific quality in the next prime minister.
Turbulent times right now, and how they navigate those headwinds or those unsteady waters is going to be important to Canadians.
And to Fort McMurray, as Canada's energy sector reckons with how it can rely less on the U.S. Julia Wong, CBC News, Fort McMurray, Alberta.
Wildfires in South Korea have displaced thousands of people in the southeastern county of Gwiseong. At least 24 people are dead and more than 200 structures have been destroyed. One was a 1,300-year-old Buddhist temple. And this morning, this man describes watching a firefighting helicopter crash in his neighborhood. The Korea Forest Service says the pilot was killed. Firefighters are struggling to contain the wildfires, which have now burned more than 17,000 hectares of land. Just one day after the U.S. reached separate ceasefire deals with Russia and Ukraine, drones are still being launched. Ukraine and Russia agreed to pause their attacks on each other's energy infrastructure, but Russia says it'll only agree to a maritime ceasefire if certain sanctions are lifted. So strikes continue over the Black Sea. The CBC's Anna Cunningham has more from London.
Ukrainian news channels today are questioning just how much progress was made in 3 days of separate talks in Saudi Arabia. From the Kremlin, accusations that Kyiv tried to attack civilian Russian energy infrastructure, a gas storage facility in Russian-occupied Crimea, and other sites in Russia's Kursk and Bryansk regions. Kyiv says Russia fired more than 100 drones on Ukraine overnight. In Riyadh, Ukraine's defense minister Rustem Umerov held out hope.
We are ready to organize a separate meeting on technical level as well to start the working on mechanisms of implementation.
But what the US announcement missed out was the fine print, the Kremlin's extra demand. Moscow says a NATO ceasefire will only come into force after a number of sanctions against its food and fertilizer trade are lifted, and that is not something Kyiv supports.
The coming days will be quite crucial,
says Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Mariana Betsa.
We can already see Russia attempting to manipulate and condition agreement.
Ukraine is pushing for further sanctions on Russia, not fewer. Moscow today says the Black Sea Initiative will be activated after a number of conditions are met. If the US lifts sanctions, it would be the first significant rollback of limitations on Russia since the war began. Anna Cunningham, CBC News, London.
Tensions are rising between the United States and Greenland. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has announced his plan to join his wife, Usha, on a trip to the Danish territory later this week. There's just one problem, says Danish officials. They were never invited. This visit follows President Donald Trump's musings about the U.S. taking over Greenland. Lars Christian Brass is a Danish MP and Deputy Speaker.
The amount of people and the people with stars on the shoulders that arrive in Greenland is sort of almost intimidating and to some extent a provocation and interference with Danish and Greenlandic issues.
Usha Vance had a planned cultural visit to the island before her husband announced his plans to join her. Also on this trip, Donald Trump's national security advisor, Mike Waltz. Denmark's prime minister is dismissing the trip as being a private visit, calling it unacceptable pressure. The Tesla takedown movement in the United States is now spreading across Canada. There have been widespread protests against Elon Musk's electric car company. Many feel the movement has become the unofficial voice of opposition to Donald Trump's administration. The CBC's Kate Nicholson explores how it might impact the Canadian election.
Never 51, Frega. Alyssa Getz has never organized a political protest in her life. Now she's even making signs for her Tesla takedown event in Oakville.
I was just feeling so overwhelmed with anxiety, and I needed to put that into action in some way instead of just like sitting and reeling and being bombarded by the media coming out of the States.
She's not alone. Outside the Tesla dealership, Mike Mayo clutches a sign as he leans against his walker.
I've never been too political before.
Before now?
Before now, yeah. I feel there is a threat to our country, both economically and potentially in terms of sovereignty.
This Tesla takedown event is distinctly Canadian, many with signs pushing back against American threats of annexation, like Gordon Boyd, who thinks this movement may impact voters in April.
I think it will have an influence on how our federal election goes.
It's a bit difficult to tell at this point how it is going to impact the election.
University of Western Ontario sociology professor Howard Ramos says Tesla takedown protests here serve as a reminder of the politics south of the border.
I can imagine that different parties, in particular the Liberals, will try and make as many linkages as they can to Musk and Trump with the Conservatives in Canada.
But while hashtag movements like Tesla takedown can quickly become global, Ramos says it's hard to tell how long they remain influential. What is clear, it's influenced Alyssa Getz and her small band of protesters. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Oakville, Ontario.
And that's the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Peter Cowan. This is CBC News.
Welcome back to London Morning at 10 past 8. I'm Andrew Brown. Coming up, spending more on defense. Flurries this morning. We could see 2 to 4 centimeters until the snow looks like it's going to last until around lunchtime today. A northwest wind gusting to 40 kilometers an hour. A high of 1 degree, and then clear tonight. A low of -7. Looks like it warms up a little bit tomorrow. A mix of sun and cloud, a high of 11 degrees. Right now it's -3. There's still some light snow coming down. Ryan's watching traffic for us on this messy morning. Ryan, hello.
Hi there. OPP have just closed the westbound side of the 401 at the 402 split following an 8-vehicle collision there. We've also got trouble east of the city at the 403 split with the 401 and also some lane closures through through Woodstock. It's in Trumbo and also on the 402. If you are on the 402, it's going to be standstill near Strathroy. So be careful. Give yourself time on the road this morning.
Thank you very much, Ryan. We'll check in again with you in about 10 minutes. Angela McInnes is here with a news update. What are you working on, Angela?
Andrew, community housing tenants handed over bags of bedbugs and cockroaches to their building manager yesterday. It was to draw attention to what they say have been chronic pest issues. They say the aging property is in a state of disrepair. Also, the community is rallying behind the woman seriously injured in Monday's violent crash on Oxford Street. A 30-year-old London man has been charged with impaired driving, and the driver of the car he hit has a long road of recovery ahead. A fundraiser to support her has already raised more than $23,000. We'll have details on these stories and others at 8:30.
National defense is often an afterthought in Canadian federal elections, but this time around it is a campaign issue because of U.S. President Donald Trump's threat to annex Canada. It's also a significant issue here in London, where defense contractors like General Dynamics Land Systems operate. Erica Simpson is here to talk about this. She's an associate professor of international politics at Western University and president of the Canadian Peace Research Association. Erica, good morning.
Good morning.
So how do you see defense factoring into the election in these early days?
Well, traditionally, actually, defense policy is never an issue that people vote on, and I don't think it will be that important despite Mr. Trump's strong statements about annexing Canada. I think people are more concerned about jobs and housing. That said, the news is full of the fact that Canada is not up to 2% of its GDP in spending, and that is similar to many of the other 32 allies. They're just not spending enough, according to Mr. Trump. And indeed, Peter Higgs yesterday wrote in a chat that it's terrible that the allies are free riding on the United States. So the Americans will bring this up. And it's a question of whether Canada wants to spend more. We're already going to increase our spending under Mr. Trudeau by another $70 billion by 2030. And Mr. Carney has come forward and said that he intends to increase the defense budget to 2% as well.
And what does that tell you?
Well, it tells us that there might be more spending here in London, Ontario on the light armored vehicles, but there will also be spending in Halifax on building frigates and helicopters, and perhaps more spending in Esquimalt in BC. Here in London, General Dynamics makes the light armored vehicles, and their main customer has always been Saudi Arabia. But as that contract comes to a close, the union workers, of course, are concerned about whether more money, more contracts, perhaps more Canadian money will be spent here in London. So that's something that local members of Parliament might want to talk about, their fragscados and so on. But really, Canada has consistently spent less than 2% since 1969. And we always make promises that we'll spend more. But the question for our audience is, do we want to spend as much as Mr. Trump?